Welcome, everybody. Welcome, wonderful people, to our session on From Soil Health to Gut Health. I'm Jonty Brunyee, and I'm the manager of FarmEd, the Centre for Farm and Food Education in the UK, in the Cotswolds. Josh, could you share my screen, please? Thank you very much. I'll just make that. Hopefully we can see that. As I say, I'm Jonty. I'm joined by two wonderful friends and colleagues, Alexis Sinclair from FarmEd 2, who's our food and nutrition coordinator, and Dr. Sally Bell, who's an NHS GP, a doctor, and a functional medicine practitioner. It's wonderful to have Alexis and Sally with me today. I'm not the expert in human health, gut health, so they're the ones to go to on those questions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the soil, a little bit about farming to set the scene. If you've not been or heard about FarmEd yet, here's just a little overview. As I say, we're the Centre for Farm and Food Education, based at Honeydale Farm in the Cotswolds. And we have a mission to accelerate the transition towards regenerative farming and sustainable food systems. And we do that by providing space and opportunity for education, some research, demonstration, knowledge exchange, lots of wonderful events and personal development. And we are a community interest company. That's the farm, 107 acres. And we've got a little bit of everything going off. We're very diverse. We're trying to show as much as we can in our 107 acres. We've got the wonderful eco buildings in the middle of the farm where the activity really focuses. We've got bees, we've got the apiary, we've got crop rotation, an 8-year rotation with 4 years of herb-rich ley, and things like heritage wheats and oats and all sorts of wild bird covers in that rotation, building fertility and providing food and wildlife and habitat. We've got woodland and trees. We've got a natural flood management scheme, got a traditional heritage orchard with lots of wonderful fruit, nuts and berries in there. We've got a 3-acre CSA, community supported agriculture scheme. And we've got permanent pasture for grazing livestock too. So lots going off in those 107 acres. And as you can see there, your animals are crucial to what we do. We're grazing animals, we're mob grazing sheep. We're about to introduce a micro dairy. We're growing heritage grains, working with a local mill. We're doing things like undersowing and cover cropping. There you can see some clover under oats, I think it is. And ideally, we want people to come to the farm who can mob people together too, get people around the site and try and inspire and get people closer to the soil and the farm. Talking regen ag, agroecology, holistic management all the time. You might ask, who is our audience? Well, our audience is everybody. It's you, it's our local communities, it's schools, it's families, it's university students, it's researchers, it's farmers, growers, foresters, landowners, of course, agronomists, new entrants from all different backgrounds, foodies, chefs, cooks, people that never even thought about getting into agriculture. We're there for them. Businesses, entrepreneurs, NGOs and policymakers, we're there for everybody. Because if we don't tell everybody and engage with everybody, the chain breaks down. And if we're going to talk about soil health all the way through to gut health, we need to engage with everybody. So please do follow us and come and see us one day. What can you do when you come to see us? Well, we have farm walks and open days. We run lots of different events and gatherings. You can hire the site for your own meeting and gathering if you wish. Eat with us, that's crucial. Let's get round the table, eat real food and let's talk food, food, food. You can learn. We've got formal modules, knowledge exchange modules, training events happening every week. And of course, we've got some research and farm demo. We're trying to come up with data and show what can be done. And if you need help one-to-one or with your farm or with your business, we can offer you consultancy, advice, and one-to-one mentoring. And we have something called the FarmEd program, which brings everything together. It's our suite of knowledge exchange and training education activities. And as I've said, we cover everything from soil health to gut health and everything in between. And just very quickly, here's a little example of our current FarmEd program menu. As you can see, it's built around food. Nibbles, starters, main course, kids menu, takeaways, and a specials menu. There's something different there for everybody at different levels. Might just be a quick takeaway, quick farm walk and some food, or a deep 3-day course, say, on holistic management, agroforestry, building soil. They're the ones that are coming up soon. So do check it out, and I hope we can see you one day. And here's the big one. Hopefully you've heard about this. Oxford Real Farming Conference in the Field. Hopefully, COVID willing, we'll be there the end of June, 1st of July at Real FarmEd, putting some of these things that we're learning here at the Oxford Real Farming Conference Global, getting our boots on and doing stuff in the field, some practical workshops at FarmEd around the subjects that you've been hearing about over the last week. Now to the focus of this evening's talk. Soil health to gut health. Wow, there's a topic. It's crazy, it's complex. Just listening to some of the talks over the last few days, it's blown me away. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly overwhelmed by it all. There's so much information. There's so much to learn. There are gaps, there are overlaps, there are conflicts, but there's lots of hope there too. But none of this is new, of course. I've been looking through some of the books at FarmEd and some of the books on my library here. And our forefathers knew that this connection ran deep from soil to animal health, to our human health, to environmental health. And I've just put the picture up there of Andrei Vosin's classic book, Soil, Grass and Cancer, the link between human and animal health and the mineral balance of the soil. It's not new, but we're putting a different spin on it and we're learning more every day, which is really exciting. How am I going to tackle this tonight? As I say, I'm not a GP, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a soil scientist. So I thought I'd very quickly tell my story, because as well as helping to manage FarmEd, I manage my own farm called Conigry Farm. It's a 180-acre, organic, pasture-fed, regenerative farm, again in the Cotswolds on the limestone. And working with my wife, Mel, we aim to build soil. We're trying to restore wildlife habitats all the time. We're trying to connect with our local communities through healthy food and the experiential and fun and getting closer to nature. That's really important to us. And at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is build a diverse range of agroecological enterprises, stacking them, making the most of them, short supply chains, adding value where we can and telling stories. But it begins with the soil. Please do check out Conigry Farm if you wish. There's some quick pictures of the farm. You can see my cattle in the middle there, traditional Hereford cattle, all pasture fed. No grains touch their lips. They live off the wildflowers, the herbs, the forbs, the grazing of the scrub and the agroforestry. Rare breed Cotswold sheep, only 2,000 in the world, turning sunlight into Sunday dinner, nothing added. No grains, again, all pasture fed and organic. We've got lots of habitat on the farm, lots of wildflowers, so we've got lots of bees now producing the most wonderful honey. Bottom right, probably the best farming decision I've made was to introduce a market garden onto the farm. A joint venture with a young grower, that's James in the middle, 3 acres, growing 50 to 60 different crops now. We've only been here 18 months and we're supplying about 60 people with a box scheme, farm shops, local restaurants, about 50 healthy, fresh, green and yellow and orange and all sorts of crazy coloured vegetables and herbs and tubers. Absolutely wonderful. Probably the best decision I've ever made. And that's about diversity. That's about soil again. And in the middle, just bottom middle, events, getting people onto farm, telling the stories, feeding people is crucial to us. That's the capstone for our farming business. But again, it all starts with the soil. We say we're regenerative, and we're trying to follow the key principles of Regen Ag, and that's about not disturbing the soil. It's about maximising crop diversity wherever you can. Not only what's in your rotation, but what is actually in the crop that you're drilling, you're sowing, you're managing. So our herb-rich lays, 10, 12, 16 different grasses and herbs in that lay, not just ryegrass and clover. So it's diversity within crop and diversity between crop. We're trying to keep the soil covered all the time. So we rarely plough. If we do plough, we don't definitely plough in autumn and leave it bare through the winter. We've always got a cover crop or something on our soil. Livestock are crucial to us, nutrient cycling, grazing stuff, turning that sunlight into Sunday dinner again, mob grazing them where we can. And hopefully, we're not always great at this, but seeking living roots all year, feeding those roots, feeding the soil, feeding the microfauna in that soil wherever we can, with muck and bale grazing and composts and anything we can do, deferred grazing, nice long grass where we can. Just feeding that soil, getting the greens and the browns into the soil. And again, this isn't new. People like Newman Turner knew this. We're talking about diverse swards and herbal leys. He described the herbal ley as the fertilizer merchant, the food manufacturer, and the vet all in one. Now, that begins with the soil, but to be a vet, you need to know about animal health and to benefit guts. And we believe the herb-rich leys benefits the guts of the animals, of our sheep and cattle. Well, how does that flow through? Well, there's a very simple picture, isn't it? But there's the roots of chicory, of ribgrass, sheep's parsley, yarrow, and some bonnet, all reaching down to different levels, different root structures, drawing up the copper, the sodium, the iron, the magnesium, pulling up water, doing that wonderful natural ecosystem service thing that we need. And that we only get that through diversity and working with nature. Reducing buckets and powders, we don't feed any nutrients anymore on our farm. We don't even use any salt licks anymore. We don't use any drenches. We blood test our animals and they're all good. And that's through diverse cropping, feeding our animals guts. Guts, thinking about worms and gut worms. Yes, since we've been using natural anthelmintics, chicory, sainfoin, bird's foot trefoil, which is my favourite, it grows even when it doesn't rain, we've reduced our worm burden and our costs of worming by about 75% in the last 6 years. We hardly worm a thing now. And that's, again, about good gut health and providing the animals with not only the right chemicals and nutrients and tannins, but also structure and things that help get the worms off the gut lining and to protect the gut lining. So again, that starts with the soil, into diversity, and helping with the gut health of our animals. So to really do, what have I noticed? I don't measure an awful lot. I'm not very scientific, but I do see things, smell things, notice things, and notice trends. And so I could say, at Conigry, since moving to this diverse, regenerative, pasture-fed approach, we've had very few foot issues, no prolapses in our animals, few metabolic issues, which surprises a lot of people, less antibiotic use for sure, less worms and lower costs. And that comes with, again, no cake, no nutrient licks, no fertilizer. And the positive environmental side, better soil for sure, higher carbon organic matter in our soils, and lots more wildlife. So win-win there. But it's more than that. Since being regenerative and being more organic than we were when we first started, we're producing this wider range of fresh, healthy and tasty food. And we're shortening the supply chain, whether it's through the vegetables that we produce, the beef, the lamb, and hopefully pork and eggs coming on stream soon. And I'll just highlight the tastiness there. I couldn't believe how tasty and fresh the vegetables would be from our market garden. And yes, all right, we've just picked it yesterday and eaten it straight from the market garden. But it's more than that. It's about how healthy and how thriving the roots were and the soil and the crops that were growing. That adds to the taste too. Is that the flavonoids? I don't know. But it's definitely, the food is tastier when the soil is good and it's a healthier crop without artificial nitrogen. So what can I say? Well, I can definitely say that the farm, my farm and Farm Ed, we're heading in the right direction when it comes to soil and habitat and ecosystem services. But there's many, many more questions, some of which have been answered this week, thankfully. Thinking back to the wonderful talk on Sunday with Dr. Sally Bell and Dan Kittredge and Gillian Butler, set up by Sally Westaway, a wonderful session. And I learnt lots from there. I learnt a little bit about how to measure the nutrient density of our food using bricks and spectrometers and refractometers, all sorts of wonderful things. And that varies, of course, from crop to crop, animal to animal, season to season, field to field. But Newcastle University and Gillian, wonderful work showing the omega-3 ratios and how much healthier that pasture-fed meat and milk is. So some wonderful work happening out there, and I defer to my learned colleagues on all of that. It leaves me with lots of other questions, though. Looking beyond the farm gate at Farmed and Conigry, I'd love to know more about the nutrient variation. Is it significant enough? Is it reliable? So we're building soil, but is the nutrient benefit, is it reliable enough, significant enough to really make a difference to consumers, chefs, retailers? And from a business point of view, should they pay more? How do we market that? And if I'm going to tell the story to my consumers, the people that buy from me direct from the farm, I want to be able to tell them, why is that important? What is gut health? Is there a link between soil health and gut health for the consumer? And is better food, and how do you define better food, is it good for gut bacteria and the good gut bacteria? And of course, it doesn't just stop there. We can do some wonderful stuff on the guts, but what else do people need to add to their lifestyles, to their rhythm, to the way they behave, that is really going to maximize or optimize their well-being and the health outcomes? And probably finally, I'd love to know more about how we get that messaging right and build that food narrative so that it's heard and understood and embraced. And at that point, I will stop and hand over to Alexis and then ultimately Sally to tell me more. And hopefully by telling your stories, Alexis and Sally, you'll fill in some of the gaps for a simple farmer like me. Thank you very much. Over to you, Alexis.
Thank you very much, Jonty, and hi everyone. It's really lovely to be here. I've had an amazing time watching a lot of your talks this week, so it's been absolutely fascinating. A bit about me. My past is I've spent 15-20 years in the catering industry, working to build and develop various food outlets, restaurants, smoothie bars, sandwich delis. And during this time, I've also trained as a nutritional therapist, and set up my own business, providing meal preps for people that I'm working with, for clients, that sort of match with the advice that I'm giving them on how they should be eating. Here at Farmed, my role is to integrate the cooking that I do in the kitchen here, and the eating with the guests that come onto site, with the production of the food that we're growing here on the farm, and to bring that all together and to sort of tell the story as a cohesive whole. I've heard lots of talks this week from various people about how we should be connecting with nature and looking after nature and working with the environment that we've been given. And for me, what's really important is just to take it right back to the basics, that we are nature. It's as simple as that. We are all so interconnected. And this is what's fascinating for me when we look at the microbiome, the gut microbiome, and how it is just the same as the soil microbiome. Those that are trying to work to develop biodiversity in the soil and a healthier soil, it's exactly the same as what we should be doing to create a biodiversity in our gut. And just like in nature, we've got ecosystems that are all interconnected, that work synergistically together. Exactly the same is happening with the bacteria in our gut, and the way that we look after that and build that is how that it can all work together and keep us healthy. I've seen loads of studies this coming up more and more, and also this week spoken with people about the data that's coming in, like Jonty mentioned, with the spectrometer and various other devices, which are fascinatingly able to start measuring the actual nutrient density of food. And lots of people questioning the direct correlation. So does the nutrient density of food directly correlate with how good that is for our gut? Like Jonty, I'm not an academic or a scientist myself, but I can talk about what I've seen as a foodie and a chef, and about what just feels right to me. And I guess you can say my gut instinct. And there's a lot to be said for that phrase. it's there for a reason. You just need to go back to basics and realize that you do just sometimes need to listen to your gut, and it is quite obvious what is the healthy and best option to give you optimum health. So some of the clients that I've worked with and fed in the past, they're coming from eating just so much processed food with very little fiber, very little nutrition, and their guts are suffering as a result of this. And what we need to be doing is just starting to eat from the basics, fresh produce that are going to build that gut microbiome. And the clients that I've worked with, within no time at all, they're telling me that their food tastes better, that they've got more energy, their health on every level starts to improve. And they're not hungry because they're actually eating nutrient-dense food, which is feeding their gut and making them healthy. Here at the farm, I'm so lucky because I get to go out and pick fresh vegetables from the field, from healthy soil, to make the food that I produce here at Farm Ed. And there may not be completely clear data yet on whether soil biodiversity directly impacts gut health, but it just seems to make complete sense. If you think about how a gut microbiome works, the more diverse it is, the more interesting different ingredients and foods that you're putting in, the more you're going to be able to absorb nutrients and fight off pathogens. And in exactly the same way, a more diverse soil allows the plants that are grown there to absorb more nutrients as well. The last thing I'll say is it's also not just about measuring data of nutrients and how that's going to scientifically impact the gut. It's about everything else. It's about getting out in nature and the love of picking fresh vegetables, the connection that you get with other people and with nature, and all of those things to reduce stress and improve your sleep that you get from living that kind of lifestyle, all are shown now to massively impact our gut health as well. So it's about working through the entire range of areas in our lifestyle that's going to improve the gut. So I'll stop there and pass on to Sally. Sally, can you just start by telling us a bit about your story?
Yeah, thanks, Alexi. Yeah, I'm Dr. Sally, and I've been a medical doctor for 21 years, and I am founder of my little clinic, Dr. Sally Bell. And about halfway through my career, having spent quite a bit of time overseas, I found myself back in inner city general practice, feeling very much like a pharmaceutical vending machine. I found, given the 40 patients that I would see every day for 10 minutes at a time, that I was never really getting to the bottom of why people were unwell, that I was treating diseases instead of treating people, that I was suppressing symptoms but never really getting to the root of why people are unwell, and treating a part of somebody and often not being able to treat the whole. And after the loss of my own health, I found myself in the NHS going through many different scans and what have you. I came out with my diagnoses and the advice to be on long-term medication. And it was at this point that I had a moment with my neurologist where I said to him, is there anything else that I can do to help get myself better? And he slipped a prescription across at me and said, Sally, just try this. And I walked away, and it was the tipping point for me. I decided there had to be a better way. And it just seemed lunacy that we were just medicating everything. And I went back to the books initially. I went back and it was like, what does my body need? Like right back to medical school in that first and second year, how do my cells function? What nutrition do they need? What does my gut need? And quite frankly, back in the 90s when I trained, we knew nothing about the gut microbiome. We as medics get taught no nutrition. And so just from that, I discovered the evidence around nutrition, its effect on our genetics, the effect of our social isolation, the effect of our sleep, all of this science had just really come on exponentially, as well as the science around the gut microbiome. And I recovered my own health. I did some training overseas with the Institute of Functional Medicine, and with the Cresser Institute, and developed a framework that I began to use with my patients. Well, actually, initially it was just family and anybody that would let me have a go, where I would use a framework which kind of looked upstream and treated the individual instead of treated disease, and tried to create an environment where people's bodies could heal and flourish, because we have an innate ability to keep ourselves disease-free. We have an innate ability to get rid of cancer cells every night when we go to sleep. We have actually an innate ability to keep our weight regulated, and to keep us disease-free, and to keep our mental health stable. But we've just lost the environment that taps into how we're genetically wired. And I created a kind of easier framework to use for when I'm coaching people, and I talk about the 5 foundations that underpin health, being sleep, movement, rest, which is tackling stress, connection with self, with others, and with our sense of purpose, and nutrition. And the reason that this framework works is that when you look at the chronic disease that is literally crippling us as a nation, 50% of our children by the time they are 18 have a medical diagnosis. 1 in 2 of us are going to experience cancer in our lifetime. The statistics just go on, and many diseases just escalating, like autoimmune disease going through the roof. And when you look at what is causing this and you step back, like 10% is because of our genetics, what we've inherited from our parents, when 90% of most disease is rooted in lifestyle. And it comes back to, like you say, Alexis, it comes back to actually doing the basics really well, sleeping well, managing our stress, connecting with ourselves and family, moving, and then looking at this very emotive topic of nutrition, which when I started looking, it is such a minefield trying to navigate the nutritional science out there. But my big message, way before we'll dive into a minute into gut health, the gut microbiome, why it's important, why it's linked to good soil. But the big take-home message, so people are not confused. I don't care whether you're vegan, paleo, gluten-free, dairy-free, I don't care. The big thing that's going to change the health of our nation is eating real food. And actually, even before we go back to actually real, well-produced food, actually getting a lot of people just eating real food is the big transition. Taking people from that place, one, that food is important and linked to health. I have to convince some of my colleagues of that. And then you get them to the point like, well, this is what we should be eating, real food. And then you take them on this journey of going further upstream and asking that question of how our food is produced and how good soil is so important for our health. So that's my overview, Alexis. I can talk about health all night, but I want to focus on the gut microbiome. Shall I go into that, or do you want to ask me anything?
Yeah, I think if we start with just from a medical perspective, why is the gut microbiome so important? Obviously, we hear more and more about it today, but can you kind of briefly explain why it is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So the gut microbiome, maybe just really starting with the basics. We have trillions and trillions of bacteria in our gut. And historically, we had no idea why they were there. And actually, many of us come from that area where we thought bacteria are dirty and bad and we should really be sterilizing everything. But what we've learned is that actually our gut and our bacteria have been educating our body and building our innate immunity for millennia. And actually, they need to be a really robust and diverse colony of bacteria. And what we see is that when we lose that diversity and when we lose that robust colony, it is linked with every chronic disease. You can do a PubMed search and, it will be linked with links with autism, to Alzheimer's, to controlling blood sugars, to obesity. get over this whole calorie in, calorie out thing when we're looking at obesity. Our microbiome has a role to play in the obesity story as well as our heart disease, as well as our autoimmune diseases. Like when that colony is disrupted, we just see a whole breakdown, you know, in every aspect of our health. And in terms of how we build our gut microbiome, you know, it really starts from birth. Like when you know, a woman's about to give birth, the microflora of her vagina changes, and as that baby, which is sterile in the uterus, comes through that birth canal, it's inoculated. And you know, one of the gifts we give as a mother is actually giving the gift of our microbiome to them. And then right through to the perfect thing that helps develop and feed that microbiome is breast milk. And then it goes on, you know, actually there's lots of things that affect our microbiome, from sleeping well to our stress. But the evidence around food is just irrefutable. You know, our gut bacteria love to eat, like we all do. And I think if people are interested to follow like the story, Tim Spector's a wonderful, safe, brilliant professor who is constantly blogging about the microbiome, how personalized nutrition is, and the effect that you know, what we're eating is having on our gut microbiome. He's a great person to follow. You know, and the PREDICT trial again, you know, I was reading today, they released something from that trial showing for the first time that actually the quality of our food, plants and animal products, are the things that feed the good bacteria. And there's certain good bacteria in our gut that has positive health outcomes in terms of our metabolic control and our sugars and inflammation. And then, so it's very important what we eat. And then the other thing is, you know, it's about diversity. Like actually the evidence shows, you know, not that we should be eating 5 a day, which are our UK guidelines. Actually, we should be eating up to 30 different types of fruit and vegetables within a week, plant-based fruit and veg and grains. And probably, if you look at a daily thing, we probably need about 10 you know, portions of plant-based foods to really nurture our gut bacteria. And you know, and the gut isn't just about the microbiome. You know, as you say, Alexi, like the gut is the second brain. There's more communication going on in the gut, you know, to the brain than anywhere else in the body. It is constantly informing us of what's going on in the world, well, yeah, I suppose in the world. And the other thing is, like, actually, you know, the gut is the main place where our happy hormones are made. I mean, we've been told this lie that depression is some, you know, a distortion of a balance of happy hormones in our brain, but there isn't a study in the world that proves that. It is a theory that sells drugs, and actually 70% of those wonderful happy hormones are found in our gut. And if we start with gut health, so much gets better. If I'm stuck like with complicated clinical scenarios, I will start with gut health. But yes.
Fab, thank you so much. I guess in some ways it sounds quite overwhelming, the fact that there are so many diseases that are all based around having an unhealthy gut. And one of the things that I find really encouraging is how quickly you can improve your gut health. So it's not something that's that takes sort of years and years to rectify. You know, I've seen studies where people have lived eating very unhealthy processed foods, and then within sort of between a week to 3 weeks of changing their diet, they see remarkable changes in their gut microbiome. So I think that's really encouraging for people who are sort of thinking, how do I even start with improving my gut health? I wondered if you can give some tips on how best to improve your gut health, what small changes people can make.
Yeah, I think so the whole story of how to help people change is, there's so much to be said. And, you know, personally, I believe health coaching is the future of medicine for our country, having somebody to coach people on how to change and how to make sustainable changes. And, you know, if somebody's going to wake up tomorrow and go, right, I'm going to eat 10 vegetables tomorrow, and they don't eat anything usually, they're probably not going to get there unless they're a particular personality type. And so really, I think, it is about tiny habits and small changes, and that will bring sustainable change. And I think the biggest thing in terms of improving gut health is trying to, sometimes I get people eating better food before they give up the processed food, because actually when they start satisfying those nutritional needs, they don't need processed food. And I think one of the reasons that we overeat processed food is actually our gut microbiome is informing our brain that it needs nutrients, and therefore it's trying to get, say, a protein from a pizza, and it just has to eat lots and lots of pizza in order to get that amount of protein. Where actually, if you eat nutrient dense food, your gut microbiome will inform your brain that actually you don't need to overeat. So sometimes in the transition of helping people change, it's starting in the small by just introducing new things and satisfying that need. So it might be, this week, add 2 extra vegetables to your plate every time you eat. Or it might be, for a lot of people, way before we think about changing, what they eat, it's actually getting present. Sit down at the table, breathe, stop, turn off your screens, get present. Because we know that if you're stressed out your brain, you're not going to absorb all that nutrition anyway, and it's damaging your gut microbiome. So sometimes it's deciding those small things, get present. I'm going to eat sitting down. I'm going to eat with, the screens off. I'm going to eat talking to my family. And then it's, introducing more diversity. Try a new vegetable, add some more plant-based into your diet. On the whole, I find when people have a lot of gut issues, often cutting down on the refined carbohydrates can really, really help. And I've noticed somebody put in the questions a thing about gluten-free and some of the evidence around that. And we can talk about that in the questions if need be. But that's not where I would start. Often it's just de-stressing, sleeping, adding in a few vegetables, and keep moving towards that real food diet.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've seen really similar with clients that I've worked with who don't, for a start, even begin to consider the fact that your sleep or your stress level, or whether you're rushing about and eating on the go, are having that much impact on your gut. But actually, it's a massive part of a cohesive whole, and it's about working with every area to improve that. And again, with the nutrient density, bringing more nutrient-dense foods in rather than trying to make people cut out and reject things from their diet straight away, because they do then find that actually you are so much more satiated and full anyway. So yes, I've seen all of those things myself. Jonty, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, thank you, Alexis. Thank you, Sally. Wonderful stuff. Just a question for Sally. I know you're so busy as a GP and doing your functional medicine, but I know you go around lots of farms seeing wonderful things too. You're trying to get below the surface and get beyond the farm gate, I suppose, the other way around. What have you seen that's really inspired you at farm level, and making those links between what's happening in farm practice to your general practice?
Yeah, I mean, about 2.5 years ago, I realised I hadn't looked far enough upstream with the nutrition piece. I had really been trying to get people into eating real food and making real food accessible to my patients. But I had no idea, I'd been in practice 18 years, consider myself fairly educated. I had no idea about soil health. I had no idea about farming. I had no idea how broken our farming and food system was. And I think probably what drew me into looking and wanting to know what the story was in our own country, initially was wanting to get some of the agrochemicals out of our diet, sort of recognizing that the impact that these agrochemicals were having on microbiome, and they're often known to confuse our hormones and those chemical messages, and a lot of them are mimicking estrogen and can be causing estrogen dependent tumors and cancers, as well as kind of the obesity story. So my initial thing was wanting to understand how to eat cleaner, I think. But then I think it was Charles Massey. I read his book, The Call of the Reed Warbler. And I mean, the way I practice medicine is so intuitive and to how we're made. And when I read the way that he was describing regenerative farming, it was so intuitive. And I feel like the story of the farmer and the medic are the same story. You know, none of us are bad people. I'm sure all farmers care about their soil. I went into medicine because I wanted to help people, but we have been indoctrinated into a system, a chemical system that treats diseases with chemicals. And regenerative farming and this style of medicine is married in that same story of going, do you know what? It's about getting back to nature. It's about respecting the part that we play. It's about diversity, you know, and it's about the whole, you know, thing, being connected to the land, connected to each other. And so I was reading all this stuff, and a lot of it was in America, and, you know, Alan Savory's stuff in Zimbabwe, and I've spent many years in Zimbabwe and in Sudan and what have you, and so it was all out there, and I didn't know what was going on here, and so I literally just kept contacting farmers, and I think I introduced myself to you, going, "Can you tell me your story?" And I have been filled with a huge amount of admiration for people who have pioneered a different way of farming, and it has helped connect me and my children and the stories we talk about when our food is on the table back to the land and back to the incredible work that farmers are doing and our food producers are doing, and just my heart is to connect people away from just buying everything from the supermarket to the incredible produce that we are producing here in the UK. And do you know what? It all tastes better, like, without a doubt. and that's what drives us. Like, we're deeply selfish, you know, beings. We just want to feel good, and real food tastes better. So, yes.
Brilliant. Thank you. So we've got about 10, 15 minutes left. Alexis, unless you've got another burning question, I'll probably go to the chat and pull out some of the wonderful questions coming in there, if that's okay. Here's the one of the crux questions, I suppose. You know, where is the science that links soil health to gut health? Where would you turn, Sally, Alexis? Are there any papers, any organisations that we should be looking at?
Yeah, I think there is science, and it is coming. So Dr. Zach Bush would be the person I would have my eyes on if you really want to understand and unpack the science and the research. Tim Spector is very good as well. Lots of stuff more about whole food, but he's now talking about quality of food, and I'd love to sit with him and ask what he means by that. There's the PREDICT trial, again, is all looking at gut microbiome. So those are some of the people I would turn to follow this story. And I think also one of the links that's indirect is, you know, when I listen to you talking about regen farming, it's all about diversity, isn't it? And we know that in order for a good, robust, healthy gut microbiome, we need diversity. And we just don't have access to that in the supermarkets. It's the same type of carrot, it's the same orange, it's the same apple. And, you know, and actually what we need from you as farmers is we need access to all of these heritage grains and, you know, all these heritage vegetables. And, you know, I want to be able to have my pasture-fed milk, and, you know, where appropriate, have raw dairy, and you know, and so I think it is, you know, the indirect thing is, as you're looking after the soil, you have to diversify, and actually that's what we need in order to thrive.
And so that comes down to supply chain and labelling as well at some point, and that speaking to a question from Glyn. When will food be priced by its nutritional value rather than the perceived value? And that's really close to my heart. You know, as a farmer, hopefully growing great produce, when can I add value because it's nutritionally better?
I'm not sure I know how to answer that question, Jonty. I don't know whether Alexis has any views. I mean, what part of my story is, you know, I worked overseas in Africa, and then we did 7 years where we went and moved and lived in the inner city, one of the most poorest housing estates in the country, to understand poverty from the inside out. And I was overwhelmed with the observation of how poor diet is on our housing estates. But that is changing, with your Lidls and your big supermarkets, bringing fresh produce into those areas. But then there's a huge other thing it's not just about price. It's, people don't know how to cook because the previous generation didn't cook. And so it's such a big story, isn't it? And that's something I'm really passionate about, is how do we make real food accessible to everybody? And it's a big story from policy through to producers, isn't it? And so I'd love if anybody's got any. I mean, I'm just reading Colin Tudge's book at the moment, The Big Rethink. So I'm hoping at the end of that I'll know everything.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking back to Dan Kittredge's and your talk on Sunday and about the work in America that Dan's doing, and that I think will lead to better labelling and adding value from that end. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so for those that didn't join, he was talking about this spectrometer device where you can zap your carrots and see the nutrient density, and he presented some really surprising graphs about just how different the nutrient density of the same type of vegetable, is. And you could have one carrot with 10 times the nutrient density than other carrots. And so it was, and it's a handheld thing. It's something you could use as a consumer and as a producer. So, if you are going to do the organic thing, then you want to do the ones that are the most nutrient dense. But yes, but I'm not sure that answers the question about accessibility and affordability for the majority, big swathe of our nation.
Yeah.
I think also the importance there is, whilst it's amazing for us to be able to measure the nutrient density, and particularly for growers to be able to see the impact that the soil biodiversity they're creating is going to have on their produce, I fear that being able to take a spectrometer into a supermarket as a consumer kind of adds another level of inequality, because if you can afford this machine to go and get the best nutrient foods, and the less nutritious foods are left, and people can't necessarily choose. So I think it's about remembering that it's not just about how nutrient dense a particular carrot is, but the importance of the diversity of the whole diet. So from a consumer's perspective, yes, they want to know that the produce that's coming into the supermarkets is as good as it can be, but rather than getting into the nitty-gritty of the exact carrot you're picking, making sure you're choosing a rainbow of vegetables, and in with that, knowing that the growers are doing their bit to improve the density, nutrient density of all of the food.
Yeah. Okay, another question. Alexis, you like fermentation. Which vegetables are best for fermenting?
Fermented vegetables, mostly harder vegetables like carrots. I'm currently making some fermented squash at the moment on the farm, and cabbage. All of those vegetables are great for pickling and fermenting, and that's obviously a really good probiotic. Along with other foods are great for probiotics are live yogurt, miso, kefir as well.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Maybe one for Sally. From Audrey, I have a super healthy diet. We are self-sufficient in all of our own fruit and veg and eat almost only these, plus locally produced eggs, venison from the hill, etc. I'm fit to get plenty of exercise, but I still have chronic irritable bowel syndrome. I've been tested and shown not to be allergic to any food. Is it the case that you can only go so far with eating well if you have a genetic predisposition to something like IBS?
She needs to come and see me in clinic. So gut health is complex because it's so involved. It's so tightly involved in our emotional health and brain health, and there's like a motorway of information going between the two. And I do, I'm not suggesting that the person that's asked the question is stressed, but that we can eat really, really healthily, but if we don't get some of those other foundations in place, they can significantly affect gut health. And that can include stress management. It's very interesting. A lot of people say, oh, I don't feel stressed. And I wire them up to my little gadgets and go, and I can demonstrate that they are still living in the stress zone, often because they just don't feel what's going on in their body. And so really, for me, I would be digging deeper into stress management, emotional health. We hold our emotions in our physical body. I would be exploring trauma, whether that's in the childhood or throughout life. I would be exploring and asking about the quality of sleep and looking at really whether they're getting healing sleep. I would be exploring the issues of connection to make sure that they're really connected and present in their body, as well as connected, relationally. I mean, social isolation just drives all disease. And that's really proven scientifically. And so making sure there's good connection, as well as a connection to that sense of purpose. Like when people are disconnected from purpose, again, it can really manifest in any physical disease. So we can get so focused on food, but it's not just about food. It is about those foundations. And that's why we need personalized health. We cannot have this one size fits all. And with what we consider as a healthy diet, I mean, Tim Spector's work is showing that, our response to food is very, very echoing. So, very, very different. And that's why nutrition needs to be very personalized. For something like that has really made those efforts, it does require the skill of somebody to be able to identify where the roots are in illness. Sorry if that was long.
Okay. Thank you, Sally. We've got loads of more questions. We do have a Zoom room set up at the end of this. The link will be coming around for everybody shortly. So see you there if you want to ask Sally. And I don't know if Alexis is going to join us for the next session, but Sally will definitely be there if you've got more questions. But we've got about 5 minutes left on this session. Here's another one. Here's another great question, one from Timothy. Is the current backlash against dairy products worrisome for the gut health of the general public because of reduced consumption of bioactive products such as yogurt?
I think real dairy, pasture fed, the evidence really is what you're feeding your animals and the diversity that you're feeding your animals, affects milk. And, we have some wonderful antioxidants in milk. We have, it's wonderfully nutritious. Actually, in full fat dairy, we've only just discovered that we have a vitamin called K2, which actually takes calcium, puts it in our bones instead of our heart. And so this whole low fat movement over the years is a disaster, and low fat dairy is, has its problems. So I think real dairy, is really good for most people. We have a lot of issue with dairy on the whole medically. I think we have a lot of people who are lactose intolerant, again because of the change in our gut microbiome, and possibly people having a reaction to how dairy is processed. But I think the whole backlash to any whole food, whether that's meat and dairy, it really worries me, because as a nation, while we're the fattest nation in Europe, we are malnourished. And people are suggesting that we take some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet out of our diet. So it does worry me, and it does grieve me. And then, yes, probably in our culture, yogurt is one of the few foods that is a regular part of our diet that is fermented. And whereas if you look on the continent, you've got your vegetable sauerkraut and things like that people, and in Japan it would be the miso and what have you. But culturally here, yes, that is one of the places that we get fermented food from. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and answer this one from Marion. Can someone explain why grain is considered such a bad feed for cattle? After all, cereals are grasses. It's a complex one, but grains do have quite a big environmental footprint of growing them, and that links to a question further down my list. As soon as you start feeding grain to a ruminant, you change the profile of the meat or the milk, and that came out of Sunday's talk and the work by Gillian Butler. So the omega-3, omega-6 balances changes, it changes for the worst. So it does affect the quality of the meat and milk very quickly. And if you feed grains, I mean, I know lots of farmers that say they're grass-fed, and yeah, they're grass-fed for 70, 80, maybe even 90% of the time of the animal's diet. But just a small amount of grain starts to change the profile of the meat and the milk quite quickly, particularly on those omega-3s, which are, do you want to say a little bit about the omega-3 thing, Sally, and how those acids are good? And is that research showing us enough significant difference in the omega-3 balance?
Again, like, fat is really, really important in our diet, and we think of fat as just, you know, that bit of wobbly stuff on our belly we don't want, but and we think that fat makes us fat, and the health messages over the last 30 years have really been devastating. And because fat is so important, it has so many other functions. You know, 60-70% of our brain is fat. And it has roles in our immunity. It has roles, you know, short chain fatty acid feed our gut bacteria and are involved in replenishing our gut lining. But fats, and in terms of inflammation, when we're thinking about the omega-3s and omega-6s, are what we're talking about here. Now, inflammation is just a process. You know, if you cut your arm and it goes red and gooey, you know, that's inflammation, and then it's, you know, it's a cycle and it shuts down and it stops. But in most chronic diseases, you find that one of the underlying mechanisms is inflammation, over-inflammation, you know, everything from heart disease to depression. And that the issue is that there's an imbalance around our omega-3s and our omega-6s. So omega-3s are very calming, they are anti-inflammatory. It's not quite as black and white as this, but on the whole, and then your omega-6s tend to be more inflammatory. And if you look back, you know, probably 40, 50 years ago, at what the balance should be between that, you know, it was 1 to 2, 1 to 3, you know, in terms of that balance, where when I measure people's omega-3 and omega-6 ratios and they're on a classic Western diet, you're looking at anything from 1 to 15 to 1 to 10, 20 pro-inflammation. And the main thing in this story is that actually our diet is packed full industrialized seed oils, which are very high in omega-6s, were never part of our natural diet, and is driving this inflammatory story. And not only that, the omega-6s then make it more difficult for us to actually access some of those pathways that change the omega-3s into some really important little molecules called EPA and DHA. And so, you know, addressing that isn't as simple as just deciding to eat grass-fed meat. The issue is taking these industrialized seed oils, your vegetable oils, your soy oil, your sunflower oil, your safflower oil out of the diet, or reducing it significantly, and then replacing it with foods that are rich in omega-3s. But really, you know, the best place to get those would be fish. You know, a little finger of fish is going to give you what you need from an omega-3 compared to, you know, to grass-fed and pasture-fed meat. But, you know, definitely having that better balance is going to be better for our health and getting that balance right. And I made comment on Sunday about, you know, my concern around veganism and not being able to get these EPA and DHA molecules, which I, you know, if somebody needs to know, I can talk about that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We've used our allotted hour. Alexis, thank you. Hope you enjoyed that. Sally, wonderful as ever. Hope everyone's enjoyed this session. Do keep in touch with Farmed and Sally and Alexis. There's lots more to talk about. We'll jump onto the Zoom in a minute or so. And we'll try and answer all the other questions. And we can see people's faces and we can have a chat.
And
thank you very much.
You can also just get a hold of me on Instagram. My handle's Dr. Sally Bell, or Facebook, or, you know, so if there's things that I've brought up, then please just fire your questions there, or my website's drsallybell.com. You can get hold of me that way. So